Next panel this afternoon, what are the reasonable limits and restrictions on immigration? Calling first, Sean Fitzgerald. Sean is a graduate of John Jay College in criminal justice with 2 degrees in criminal justice. Upon graduating, he worked as a videographer and editor for John Jay Online and developed graduate-level video courses in the subject of criminal justice, public administration, and counterterrorism. Sean is the owner and content creator for the YouTube channel Actual Justice Warrior, where he covers criminal justice issues as well as politics from a libertarian perspective. I scrolled right down. Okay, got it. Sydney Watson is a right-wing political commentator, YouTuber, and journalist. She has appeared as a contributor on Sky News Australia, America This Week, and One American News Network. And her writings have appeared in Human Events, The Herald Sun, and The Spectator Australia. She now writes and creates video content about feminism, gun laws, men's rights, and other issues pertaining to politics and the culture wars around the world. Elijah Schaffer, host of the Blaze TV's Slightly Offensive. Elijah Schaffer is known for his street interviews, weekly podcasts, and breaking news coverage, which regularly plays a role in national discourse on controversial events. And last but not least, the big little man, Michael Gonzales. Michael LSP Gonzales is a liberal YouTuber with a degree in political science and fine arts. When he's not fighting on Twitter, he's creating video essays which discuss social issues and history. I got it. Stay right there. And last but not least, the most beautiful man I've seen in the last 35 seconds, my good friend and one of the founding members, Brian Edwards.
Okay, so we have thanks, Justin, appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We really appreciate your time coming out amongst all of the craziness that 2020 has given us. The thing is, when the Mythinformed team was coming up with all these panel topics 6 months ago, I was convinced that this was going to be the spiciest of all the third rail topics that we tend to tread on. And it turns out I was wrong. Coronavirus plus the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter thing, I mean, has thrown a curveball that even Justin Verlander would be envious of. So immigration has kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit. So we definitely want to talk about this. I don't know if anyone here considers themselves an expert on immigration policy, but I don't think that's absolutely necessary. I'm not certain I am. But it's still the discussion that's been coming up a lot. It certainly came up a lot in the Democratic debates. So it's definitely worth addressing. And since we're doing third rail topics, let's get her electrocuted. So what I want to talk about is what obligations does America have to accept immigrants and refugees? And are they political or moral, or do they have any obligations at all? And this time we're going to start over here, and we're going to go with you, Michael. Fire away.
Hello, can you guys hear me? You guys having fun? We're going to do some audience participation here. I want you all to clap once if you're having fun. Great. So the question is, what obligations does the United States have in accepting immigrants and refugees? I would argue 2 ways. This obligation is one moral, and this obligation is one legal. When it comes to refugees, we are signatories on international law, which says we will assist the rest of the world in the acceptance of refugees. Now, arguably, since the refugee crisis in Syria and Iraq had happened, we haven't been doing such a hot job of that. Now, I know Sean's answer to this is, well, we've accepted more refugees historically than any other country.
And kind of bring it up to the microphone a little bit.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to be a little closer to this mic. As for the moral obligations, I want you to clap once if you're a believer in liberal values. Oh, come on, guys. Okay, so a basic
could be
core
just
principle,
their hands hurt.
A basic core principle of any sort of liberal value and any liberal worth of thought will tell you this is the freedom of movement. When you look at what immigration does to a country, and you look at this country and the way immigration has shaped it, what you see is immigrants grow the economy. Any economist will tell you that immigrants grow the economy. They do. They represent a supply of consumers. They represent a supply of laborers. They represent a supply of taxpayers. And they also reduce crime, because when immigrants come to this country, they don't actually commit a lot of crime. You can't say the same about American citizens. They actually commit, their rates of criminality and incarceration are phenomenally higher than that of immigrants. In fact, an immigrant in the first generation is 45% less likely to be incarcerated for a crime than an American citizen. In the second generation, it's something like 27%. And these aren't my figures. These are the figures from the US Census Bureau. By the third generation, the fourth generation, these figures start to even out because immigrants are assimilating. So I know Sydney's problem with immigration is this lack of assimilation. This is what assimilation looks like sometimes. This is a part of it. But when it comes to immigrant success stories in this country and what obligations we have to them, well, let's look at what they can do for us. Free movement is a liberal principle. It grows our economy. It reduces crime. There you go.
Okay, Sydney, you've been tagged in, I think. So the obligatory response is going to come to you.
Well, I come from a country where immigration is, I think, dealt with better than the United States because we have a natural wall, being the ocean, the Pacific Ocean in Australia. But by the same token, I also think that what you're specifically talking about is crime rates and things like that. And assimilation is a huge thing for people like me. And in my home country, with the immigrants that we do bring in, they don't assimilate. They create enclaves. And these enclaves lead to a self-segregation of the community. So you have, and it's happening in America. I live in Texas now. There's a big separation between the white population and some of the Hispanic population. You go into areas that are entirely Hispanic and what have you. I mean, my question to you would be, do you think that that's normal? Should that be happening?
Can I quick ask, like, what population of immigrants is not assimilating? Or what's the primary
Do you
immigration?
mean in America or Australia?
Yeah, Australia.
So the Middle Eastern population often doesn't assimilate. So specifically, people who follow the Islamic religion don't assimilate. They've created enclaves in my home city, Melbourne, just for example. And they've done this all over. I mean, but there are specific groups of people. So I mean, and this is not to say that there's anything wrong with having people come to your country, but the frequency in which it's happening is the problem. Because if you want people to actually join in with your culture and with your community and what have you, you probably need to bring in a smaller rate of people. That's just how I view this. But again, to my question, I mean, do you think that it's okay that people are creating enclaves?
That's a really broad and tough question. When I think about American culture and what American culture specifically is, or American values, I think of an immigrant named Sydney Watson who comes from Australia, who certainly doesn't share my culture or values. We have very different
She's not
views
an
of the
immigrant.
world.
She's an American citizen.
I'm sorry, you're not an immigrant from Australia?
Well, I'm an American citizen. My mom's American.
Okay,
The
that's
majority
good.
of my
I'm glad
family
you're an
is
American
from-
citizen, but you did, in fact, immigrate here from Australia.
But
did you
I'm a
not?
citizen by birth. Like I could have easily at any point
Would you
grown
say
up in America.
would you say your culture is more Australian or American?
I would say it's, no, but I don't think that, I'm not a case study here because my values are entirely predicated on the country that I'm in. I live in the United States, and therefore a lot of Aussies would argue that my values are entirely American, or at least
So why wouldn't that same argument apply to any immigrant group? They live in the United
But
States.
I
their
grew up with
values-
an American mother. I grew up with
Sure.
American influence in my life because my home life was split 50-50 between Australia and America. But when you're bringing people in from cultures that do not reflect and do not hold the same value systems as
Which values?
well, I'm not. This doesn't come down to a liberal or a conservative value system. It comes down to like there are cultures out there that think it's okay to hurt women, or that women are half the value of a man, for example. There are cultures out there that are okay with treating or subjugating women and things like that. And these are cultures that are completely incompatible with the American way of life, regardless if you're conservative or liberal. This is not a I don't know. Like, am I wrong here? Like, no.
No, of course you're not wrong. Absolutely, there are cultures and values which are, I would fairly describe as regressive. I think there are cultures
What
and values.
cultures are you thinking of?
Okay, so I mean, if you want me to name specific cultures, I think there are
Yes.
elements of Islamic culture and certain parts of the Middle East or certain parts of North Africa that have very negative attitudes towards women. But I don't segregate people on the basis of culture because I don't believe, and homosexuals, sure. But if you want to break this down by data, we want to look at what these different immigrant groups from these different cultures believe, we can look at Muslim immigrants in the United States. There's 3 million Muslims in the United States. Roughly 60% of them are from immigrant backgrounds. And of those 60%, they have more progressive views on issues like homosexuality, on issues like diversity, issues like immigration, arguably than most American conservatives. So, I mean, the issue is, what values do you want them to assimilate to? Is it an issue? I'm sorry, your first question was, is it okay for them to come into immigrant enclaves. I mean, I would say no. Ideally, you want people to assimilate to society broader, but this isn't an argument against immigration. This is an argument against assimilating immigrants poorly. If you want to assimilate immigrants in a way that is more cohesively founded, sound for the rest of the United States, I wouldn't have a problem against that. I'd love that as an opportunity. I like immigrants. So, I mean, yeah, by all means, that's an issue, sure. But the solution isn't to just stop immigration. The solution is to assimilate them better.
Well, Sean, let's get you in here. Are you in between, or what do you think?
Well, the Muslim population in the United States is relatively small. I do think the United States of America is better at assimilating Islamic populations than Europe. But to the original question, do we have a moral obligation to take refugees? To be fair, we have taken more. Like he already said, one of the points I was going to bring up. Mind reading. But yeah, we have taken more refugees in the United States than any other country in the history of the world. Obviously, we do have a legal obligation under a UN treaty, but I'm not a fan of the UN, so I don't put much weight in that. But I would say it would depend on the refugees. If you're talking about the Yazidis that are about to be massacred by ISIS, a religious minority that's being persecuted, I do think it was good and a moral thing to do to import those people into the United States and other parts of the world where they wouldn't be wiped off of the face of the earth. But there's refugees around the world constantly from all different places, and I don't think it's unfair for the United States to prioritize refugees that are already like baked in, aligned with the United States values. And sometimes it's not even values, it could just be something as simple as high rates of English speaking. Because if you speak the common language, then the values in a generation or two will come along with it. Like Hong Kong's population, these are people crying out to live in a Western country. They're singing our national anthem in the streets. They're waving our flag under actual penalties from an authoritarian government, and 51% of their population knows some English. I think that's a good set of refugees to start off with, and that's who I would prioritize over maybe Syrian refugees or refugees from the Islamic world that, you know, when they're not fighting whoever they're fighting in their home country, are burning the American flag.
Okay, so I'm sorry, can I
All right,
respond to that?
Elijah, do you want to quick
Yeah,
get on?
I'll chime in. You know, I like your comment about the UN, because the UN does remind me a lot of my ex-girlfriend. Absolute trash and costs too much money. It's true.
LOL.
Abolish the UN. But
Isn't
anyway,
it a shame people don't respect women in this country?
Oh yeah, me and the Muslims have a lot in common. No, I'm just kidding. But there's a thing called comedy, and we can make fun of people in a jesting way. We just don't behead them when we disagree with them. But I will say this.
Or throw them off of buildings.
I will throw homosexuals off of buildings. I mean, I have some gay friends that are insufferable, but I wouldn't kill them. Anyway,
If only Matthew Shepard had the same.
Yeah. I was going to say, you know, number one, bullshit aside, we don't owe anyone outside of the United States an obligation for anything. And we, in our country, have spent too much time, realistically speaking, just pretending like we're the police of the world. And we owe everybody money, even countries that hate us. And that anybody who wants to live here should belong here. And I don't know what critical race theory BS that is, or what we can begin to think about how that would help our country. But I mean, this sounds like such a reductionist argument. But even when you're cooking food, right? Even the melting pot argument is insane. You don't just put anything in a pot and eat it. The difference between a good meal and absolute shit is dependent on the ingredients that are put in it and the people that are making it. And so it's like when you look at this, and we had about 38,000, I think, is this 2019, 2018, around there? We averaged about 38,000 asylum grantees, which is pretty good. That's pretty great. It could be higher, and it should be higher, I think, in some ways, like you were mentioning, from countries like Hong Kong, et cetera. Well, I think it's a country, by the way. China can kiss my you-know-what, because it is a country, okay? It is. Hong Kong's a country. And when you talk about this, if you start at the base level of we don't owe anyone anything, then we can actually have a real conversation about immigration. But I want to distinctualize this, and I'll end with this. Number one, we need to start having the clear dichotomy of there are illegal immigrants and there are legal immigrants. And we've got to stop putting a cherry on top and coding it like illegal immigrants are the same thing as people who are doing things the legal way and going through a correct route to enter this country. And I think the far left has done a really good job at blurring the lines there. So if we're going to talk about immigration, I was also going to ask you, when you're talking about immigrants, like you'll make a comment like, oh, well, immigrants commit less crime. Well, if we're talking about illegal immigrants, even if it's only one crime, if there were no illegal immigrants, that would still one crime like too much, right? So it's still a net positive with illegal immigration, with crime. I hate those arguments of like, well, they do contribute some money. I'm like, they also take a damn lot of money as well. So if we can talk about the pros and the cons, but with legal immigration, that's all I want to ask you. Are you referring to immigration as a whole, or are you referring to both as separate entities?
So both legal and illegal immigration grows the economy and reduces crime. There's a lot to unpack from what Elijah just said. Firstly, you're flat wrong about critical race theory, and I'm sorry to tell you, because one of the reasons critical race theory is so controversial, yes, you're laughing, but here's why. It's because racial separatism is a core component of it, which is why I don't subscribe to critical race theory. Oddly enough, you're closer to critical race theory than I am on this.
I'm critical of race theory.
Nice dodge. As for like oh man, there's so many broader arguments I wanted to address here about we don't owe anything to the world. You don't have to owe anything to the world to take immigrants. We're not suggesting you provide every immigrant who comes here with all the welfare they need. All my suggestion would be is just open the door and let them pursue their interests like any other person would. What could possibly be so wrong with that if they're reducing crime, if they're growing the economy, even if they're assimilating the culture? If your issue is how much is spent on immigrants, a big part of what's spent on immigration is immigration enforcement. A lot of money goes to educating immigrants, so right there's investment costs on our part, which means we're investing in their human capital. We want them here. We should want them here. We're paying for their education. And the other part is immigration enforcement. You could eliminate that if you just open the borders.
Yeah. So to the point about immigration or immigrants committing crime and illegal versus legal, I'm not sure where you're getting those numbers from, because only one state, to my knowledge, actually checks immigration status upon arrest point. So only one state is producing any kind of numbers on illegal immigrants committing crime, and that's the state of Texas. Arizona tried, but they were forbidden from doing so by the Supreme Court. So I don't know how you're measuring the distinction between those. And as far as per capita crime rates, yes, if you import any population into the country and they commit a lower per capita murder rate, then the murder rate will go down. But if you import a bunch of people and they commit 500 murders, despite the rate of those murders being lower, you are increasing murders. And illegal immigrants have a lower rate of crime in the United States of America compared to our general population, because African Americans in the United States of America have a way higher rate of crime compared to the rest of the population. So, like, if you compare them to Hispanic natives or any other demographic, the Asian population here, then the rate of crime is higher. It's just that African American crime is a huge problem in the United States of America.
Sure. So your first question was, where am I getting these numbers? There's a lot of different sources. There are criminologists named Ruben Rumbaud or Walter Ewig, who works for the American Immigration Council. This same findings have been affirmed by the National Academy of Sciences and the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm aware of Texas numbers and aware of Arizona's numbers. I'm also aware of why it's flawed to rely on these numbers. One is a conviction arrest gap. They can't prove these. The data has also been questioned by both the Cato Institute and the National Academy of Sciences paper, which, if you're curious, there's a mega study on immigration by the National Academy of Sciences that goes into all of these questions. It's very much worth looking into.
But my question is, where are you getting the distinction between illegal and legal immigrants in those crime statistics if only one state is measuring crime with that
It's
distinction?
from Walter Ewig, who did the study for the Police Foundation.
Okay, but where is he getting that underlying data is what I'm asking.
You'd have to ask
And
him.
is there a separation between legal immigrants who obviously, the process to be here legally is incredibly difficult.
Sure.
Typically, a criminal is not going to go through all that process just to sell drugs on the street or rob corner stores or whatever.
So
where's the distinction between illegal immigrants and legal immigrants and those respective crime rates?
You'd have to ask Walter Ewig how he derives his numbers. I didn't conduct the study. I went by what Walter Ewig found, what his findings were for the Police Foundation. I assume as a criminologist and as an economist, he's generally a little bit more reliable than the Elijah Schaffers of the world, no disrespect intended. It's so far as shots fired. Yeah, we're going to have some. Actually, I'll let you get in on this.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been tagged in.
So,
I'm tagged in. Go ahead. Keep going.
all right, I want to talk about, because what Elijah and Sydney asked me earlier, if we could concentrate specifically less on the economic argument for immigration.
No, that's not what I
Yeah,
said.
no, I wanna
I
say
said let's go.
economic.
Let's.
The culture argument? You didn't ask to talk
Not
about
making
culture?
it
I mean,
boring
this is
for
what
the
liberals
people who
love to
paid
do.
to be
Love
here.
to just misconstrue people's arguments because it's way more fun to create your own narrative
I'm
to just
sorry,
stick
I
with
thought I
than
was
what other people
reciting
have
you
to say.
exactly.
Oh
You
my
wanted to
God.
talk about culture.
God damn.
Stop
So
mansplaining.
how did he misconstrue? Where do you feel like he misconstrued
All I
it?
simply said was immigration's fucking fucking boring. Like, I'm sorry, but this is not pertinent right now. No one cares about immigrants because the whole bloody borders are closed across the entirety of the freaking world. Like, what planet are we on? The things that matter right now are things like police brutality, which is basically why, you know, like Seattle and Portland and Chicago are on fire, things like that. These things matter. And my point simply was, let's go down more of a cultural road to talk about, you know, you guys love immigration because the Democrats love immigration because you get the votes out of it. Why can't we talk about something like that that's considerably more interesting
Sure.
than, oh, the crime rates of the illegal immigrants that we can't even actually
well,
tag because I don't even know who's an illegal immigrant in this country. How can you measure illegal immigrants?
So
You don't even know how many are here.
Let me start. I'm sorry if I misconstrued you, Sydney. I seem to remember you wanting to talk about culture. You're asking why? Because we're in an event called Better Discourse, where I assume we want to talk about a range of issues related to immigration, and not just the culture of immigrants
Take shots at us on
itself.
stage. Come on, bro.
Oh, come on, they're little love. I'm sorry. Elijah runs a podcast called Slightly Offensive. I figured you can take a little bit of a love
He
jab,
can,
can't
but I
you?
can't. I'll defend him till the day
You
I
can't.
die.
Okay. Well,
Come on. And I thought this wasn't going to be spicy.
I bring the spice. I am the pepper here.
Well,
So I'm sorry. Can I? The reason. So there's a lot of misconceptions about immigration, and a lot of misconceptions that have been repeated time and time again by the conservative side of the aisle. I am here to shine a light on what these misconceptions are. It is related to criminality, and it is related to economics. Now, if you want to move on from these arguments and talk about culture, I'm perfectly willing to do that. If we can just talk about, hey, maybe we can just agree that the economic benefits of immigration are good. That the immigrants can reduce
hold on.
crime. What you
Wrong.
got?
Well,
What you got, Sean?
There are economic benefits of immigration for sure, but when we're talking about illegal immigration, I'm not denying that the GDP goes up if you have more people working in the economy, but there are also losers in that scenario, and an immigration policy for a nation state should probably first and foremost consider
Sure.
people within that nation state. And when you're importing a lot of low-wage workers that are going to work illegally under the table, they drive down the wages of poor people that are unskilled in our country. And this is disproportionately impacted in black unemployment numbers. These people are losing their jobs. They took our jobs, yes, I said it, to illegal immigrants. So yeah, there's a benefit to the overall GDP. That number goes up, but there are significant losers in that equation, and those losers happen to be American citizens. On top of that, like there's cultural issues and all that, but it's not just the low-wage workers that take advantage of our immigration system. Like our big tech companies take advantage of the H-1B system. And they're supposed to make prevailing wage for the work that they do at these companies. And one of the things that they've been caught doing is that instead of hiring, first of all, they're not hiring Americans, but instead of actually hiring these H-1B workers, they contract out that work to a company that just hires H-1B workers so that they can shift work that was once done at Google to a contractor that's doing the same work for Google at a much lower rate. So we should focus on our illegal and legal immigration policies in such a way that it benefits American citizens first and foremost. And as for the economic reasoning, yeah, they do pay some money in taxes. That number does exist. But they take a lot more money. Like you talked about investing in education. Like what that actually costs is $12,000 per pupil. Meaning if you come here illegally and you're not paying income taxes, you're working under the table, and you bring 2 kids along with you, you're taking from the system just because your kids are going to school $12,000 a year per kid. That's $24K. I don't think they're making that up in sales tax.
No, but they make it up in property tax. But I'm glad you want to talk about the economics of it.
I don't know a lot of illegal immigrants that own houses that are dropping 12K.
Well,
I live in New York. I know
yeah,
a ton
legal
of them.
immigrants pay tax.
You want to talk about like
Love that.
how immigrants impact low wages. I love this. I want to get into this because this is a common misconception. So I want you to clap once if you've ever seen the movie Scarface. We're going to do some audience participations. Clap once. Okay, at the beginning of the movie Scarface, there is an infographic that describes how Tony Montana ended up in the Miami area. And it describes this massive refugee movement from the Mariel Harbor of Cuba to Miami. And this was an actual event that called. This wasn't a MacGuffin for the film. This was a real event called the Mariel Boat Lift. Now, conventional economic wisdom was that when you have 200,000 refugees and immigrants coming from Cuba and immigrating to Miami in this clustered small area, the sky's going to fall. Cats and dogs are going to get together. You know, Japan's going to sink back to the ocean. It'll be the end of the republic. And actually, that wasn't what happened. You had an economist who did a very famous study on it named David Card, who looked at what happens when you get 200,000 people into a local economy. And conventional wisdom was everyone's wages would drop. Unemployment would skyrocket. What actually happened was everyone's wages didn't drop and unemployment didn't skyrocket. Actually, it grew the economy because you had 200,000 new people to buy stuff. And what you spend is what I earned. Conversely, the other way around. That's how the economy works. It's a famous study which addresses the very issue you have. Ideally, it would affect low-wage workers. It didn't.
Oh, I would definitely prioritize immigrants from communist countries or socialist countries because they come here and they actually buy into the American system. You're talking about Cubans. Cubans outperform every other Latino demographic group. And the Cuban immigration system for a long time was you make it to shore, you don't commit a crime for a year, you get U.S. citizenship because those people are actual legitimate refugees of socialist nations. So yeah, like I'm not saying Cubans hurt Miami. That's one isolated population that, again, is an anomaly among Hispanics. Like, I'm from a Puerto Rican background where you have natural-born American citizenship. We don't do nowhere nearly as well as the Cubans do. Like,
So he says it's an anomaly amongst Hispanics. It's not an anomaly. It's
the
not
Cubans are
it's-
definitely
it's-
an anomaly amongst Hispanics. Look at how much money...
I'm sorry, the Cubans might be an anomaly. Let me rephrase this then, because I misunderstood how you used anomaly. This event itself was not an anomalous event, right? This event didn't just happen, and it was like, well, that was weird. I guess this probably isn't going to happen again. A lot of economists have looked into David Card's work, and they found it time and time again that, yes, this is actually, his findings are statistically sound. Similarly, when the Soviet Union collapsed, you had this mass migration movement out of the Soviet Union. It was called the post-Soviet Alaya. It was a mass movement of Jewish immigrants from former Soviet states who all engaged in the right of return to Israel. More than 1 million immigrants came to Israel, and the same wisdom that you thought would apply there applied here, right? It's a lot of immigrants. They're going to work for lower wages. The sky will fall. Japan will sink into the ocean. And once again, what you found was the opposite. It grew the economy.
Again, Jews succeed everywhere they go around the world, and when you
Is it intrinsic?
When you immigrate to, it's not intrinsic. When you immigrate to Israel as a Jewish person, there is a level of buy-in to that society. It's quite literally the Jewish state. Like, I'm on board for people, and I want to prioritize people that have a built-in buy-in to the United States of America, or if I'm any European country,
Don't you think
to
any
that
immigrant
country.
group who comes here and risks life, limb, blood, and happiness just to get here
I
also wants
think-
to buy
I-
into this country?
I think there's more buy-in from somebody who swims 90 miles through shark-infested waters than somebody who comes up from Mexico
And travels 90
sends money
miles through
back
hot desert?
and sends money back to their family because they're really interested in earning money because low wages over here translate to a better life in Mexico. I have nothing against the person who does that personally, but the level of buy-in is not the same. Like, these people are fleeing an oppressive authoritarian government. A lot of great Cuban entrepreneurs were actually entrepreneurs in Cuba that had their businesses stolen from them, and they came here and they bring that creativity, that human capital here, and they recreate that success, sometimes in a completely different industry when they come here. I would definitely prioritize English speakers, people who flee former Soviet nations, people who flee any type of communism or socialism because they're less likely to vote for that and put us in that similar oppressive system because they've seen it firsthand. So yeah, there is a different level of buy-in from different immigration demographic groups, and we can see that because different immigration demographic groups do differently when they get here.
Okay, so you invoked Tony Montana, and I definitely think Elijah's like sitting over there about ready to say hello to my little friend.
Just going, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, what kind of example was that? I mean, realistically speaking, you make claims like, oh, you must not know a lot of illegal immigrants and stuff. First of all, I once lived in the city of illegal immigrants for my entire life. It's called Los Angeles. They were thinking of changing the name to just illegal. I mean, that city is absolute madness. Some recent numbers put the estimates of over 1 million to 1.8 million illegals just in Los Angeles, which accounts in the county for approximately 10 to 14% of the population. Absolutely freaking insane. And if you want to tell me about how illegal immigrant neighborhoods are safe, well, enjoy living in one, because I have, and it was not fantastic.
What's the downsides then? So there's
Yeah.
that you're like, so if you're saying yes, there's X amount of people there, but like, what's the impact?
Yeah, so number one, here's a problem. When you have an uncontrolled population like we see in Los Angeles, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but even if you're against abortion, if you just go on the 405 freeway during rush hour traffic in Los Angeles, you'll wish more people killed their children. Honestly, because that place is overcrowded to the max. And I can make jokes about it, but I'll tell you this. It's absolutely I don't even want to say, but it is absolutely in a position where it's almost like it cannot be reversed. The reason why Los Angeles has such problems even managing itself, its homelessness, its problems, is because if you already have this large population, which we're seeing currently with some of the immigration problems in Nordic countries when they allowed a lot of Syrians over and this problem with assimilation, these cultures do not assimilate. The Hispanic enclaves do not assimilate in Los Angeles. In fact, it's very common in LA to not even find people that speak English. And I've lived there for 27 years, and I'm not making that up. Anyone who goes to Los Angeles can absolutely back that up, that it is hard to find people in many regions that actually speak English. And in fact, if you look at immigrant populations, one of the main reasons why, and I've looked at urban housing studies in Los Angeles, talk about the reason why some prices have risen up in barrios and the reason why there's increased black homelessness is because some of the rental property owners are packing illegal immigrant families into houses that are paying into one place illegally without permits that they can't even fit that many people inside. They're putting up sheets. They're charging a high cash price. It's artificially inflating lower income neighborhoods and the rent prices, which is actually pushing poor black people out on the streets, which is causing an increase in black homelessness. So that's just one issue. I actually like black people, so I'm against illegal immigration. But I know that the Democrats don't like either. So, I mean,
to be totally fair, though, like, when you talk about speaking the language, too, but tons of Italians came over, and many of the generations didn't speak the language either, where you have grandma and maybe even parents not speaking it, but then kids speaking, and that turned out okay. So is the language thing itself automatically an issue?
Yeah, abso-freaking-lutely it is. Because what happens is that there's not a push. Like, I know because I have, my ancestors came over and they spoke German, okay? That's really crazy. I know you're going to be like, he's a Nazi. No, I'm not a Nazi.
He didn't say that.
I know, no, I'm joking.
I got your back, Michael.
But no. I'm just bringing this up. The fact is I know from talking to my family, is that there was a push to learn English. There was a push to assimilate. And the problem that I'm seeing in a place like Los Angeles is there's a lot of Mexican pride, a lot of Mexican flags being waved, a lot of La Raza and Brown Pride and Mecha. And there are these groups that are pushing people to actually not assimilate. And the schools are teaching kids, LAUSD is more concerned, if you even look at the teachers union that's on strike right now, the demands they want to go back to school include like racial equity and justice, things that have nothing to do with teaching. It's completely backwards in Los Angeles, absolutely. I mean, even my professor in college told me, your race is on the decline. And I was like, okay, that's not racist, whatever. Anyway, moving on. In Los Angeles, specifically speaking, I don't think there's a problem if someone immigrates here and doesn't really know the language. I do think there's a problem when it's promoted to speak Spanish, when there is nobody else speaking English, and you're looking at it generations down the road, and even some kids, even friends of mine, by the way, I actually have illegal immigrant friends, believe it or not, I do think they're humans, and they also realize that there are some legal issues. Not all legal immigrants are the same. Some actually would vote for Trump if they could, and it would do them better, actually. But in the end, when you look at this, that language issue, that barrier, is continually reinforced culturally. We're in a culture war. And immigrants aren't being told there's an American way. They're being told to hate their country. They're being told that white people hate you. If you assimilate and if you stand for the national anthem, you actually are standing up to white supremacy. If you speak English, that's the colonial language. I even had a guy who spoke Spanish. I go, you think Spanish didn't come from colonizers? You're an idiot. Anyway, it's like they call it the native language in LA. I've heard a lot of people.
South America would like to have a conversation with them, please.
It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm saying
To
it is
be
a
fair,
problem.
it's not the immigrants themselves that are coming over that are kind of pushing this, right? You could make it a case that Islamic immigration, when they're coming in, you have their own system. Imams may be pushing this, but I don't think that the immigrants are pushing critical race theory. It's the professors.
I mean,
Are
yes.
they, am I wrong?
No, but see, that's where we bring. That's what I'll let you. Someone's going to jump in, but I'll let you jump in. But I think this is where we keep going. It's like, well, I mean, it's not like young black men are born violent and criminals, and that's true. They aren't. But it's also like you can't just say that and then not look at the actual problem that's happening in certain areas of South Chicago with violent gangs, et cetera, and look at the dangers for a young black man growing up in a low socioeconomic class in that region and the propensity and the possibility of him becoming a violent criminal. And so I'm saying I don't think immigrants are coming here to be destructive, et cetera, but I think there's a clear distinction in immigration today versus where it was at a certain point in history, where people saw themselves more as settlers, people saw themselves more to build their own dominion, where now we're forming basically micro countries crises within our own country. And I think it's absolutely, as we're seeing with the George Floyd thing, it is not bringing unity in our country, and it might actually lead to our downfall.
All right. So what I was thinking, some of this comes around into language, right? Like critical race theory bomb got thrown up in here, and no longer is it
It's
cool.
academic flim-flam. We don't say that here.
What's that?
It's academic flim-flam. Critical
Academic
race
film
theory.
flam. All right, I've never heard that.
Does
But
anyone actually know what
you're
that
not allowed
is?
to say.
Like, am I
you're
the
not-
only one that's here just like...
But we're not supposed to say illegal immigrants. You're supposed to say undocumented.
Well, this is
Right.
what like parts of, I mean, I'll say the radical left because I'll spare the normal liberals. This is what the radical left do. They take some, yeah, love you guys. They take semantics and they use words to change the discussion. So, for example, I mean, if I stole something, am I now an undocumented buyer? Like, I mean, and this is the thing. This is what happens when you change language and you start using it. I mean, am I wrong? Like, when you start using it in these specific ways, you change the entire discourse. And so now, because a lot of people argue saying, illegal immigrant or illegal alien, for example, would dehumanize these people. A lot of people, I know people who would argue that. So when you say it's an undocumented migrant sounds much better, much nicer, much more palatable. But it doesn't change the fact that these people are still coming here illegally. And the question I wanted to ask before, and I'm sorry to hijack this slightly.
Go for
this
it.
is for you, Mike. How do you feel towards, say, immigrants coming from, say, South Africa, like the white population over there that's obviously being murdered at a rate of knots? What do you think about them coming to America, or do we
I
only?
literally
Or do
have
we,
no problem with them coming to America. I would embrace
are they
them
on the
with
same
open
level
arms.
to you as, say, someone who's from Myanmar?
The same level? Am I
Yeah,
supposed
because I know
to
that
measure them at a different level?
Well, for some people, yeah, of course. I mean, some people don't want white populations
No, I tend to view
migrating to other white
everybody
countries.
pretty equally, regardless of their background, culture, or even political
Do you
affiliation.
see them as refugees?
Do I see them as refugees? If they are refugees who've registered with the UNHCR, the refugee agency with the UN,
What if they came on a boat?
sure.
What if they jumped the wall or the border? Like, there's
Well, then
no
it seems
wall.
like they really want to get in here, and they should be allowed to come here.
What is the upward cap on who could come here? Is it just anybody who wants to come here?
So I mean, the
In your
upward cap
opinion,
in
not
law,
not legally. In your
Oh.
opinion.
If I could have my way and build the perfect world, it seems a little silly to me that in much the same way I could shop at a restaurant and I can find items on the menu that appeal to me in certain ways, and I gravitate towards those items on the menu, that immigrants can't conversely do this with a different country or a different culture. It seems weird to me that I could like the German experiment as it stands right now and not immigrate there. Because I was born here and for no other reason, even though functionally in every way conceivable, I identify with the culture. And I would say it's the same with any culture anywhere. The crux of your issues seem to be assimilation. What does it look like when the immigrant tries to assimilate here? Or what does it look like when they fail to assimilate here? I would submit to you, if you want a real world experiment, a real world example of how assimilation works by osmosis and creates a unique cultural identity of its own, you can look at two towns. You can look at El Paso, and you can look at my hometown of San Antonio. It's a great place, and it's got its own unique cultural identity that is a blend of the different cultures of Texas, the different cultures of America, the different cultures of Mexico, and it's great. And what's really cool about like open borders immigration is if I decided that wasn't for me, I wanted a more Mexican experience, or I wanted a more American experience, I wanted whatever different experience I want, I should just be able to go there.
Wait, so first of all, my hometown is San Antonio too. I was born there. So yeah, San Antonio.
Woo! Go
Yeah,
Spurs.
So there's no limit. So anybody could come here and become citizens. Like,
Yeah, in my ideal world, then this
What
is what
about
the country's.
sovereignty? Like,
so
do you
what
not
the-
believe in border sovereignty? The fact that countries should be able to
You should protect-
monitor and,
sure.
I mean, sovereign borders is one of the most important things in the world that we're in. I mean, that's why we could close the borders and keep the fun virus, the mask that you're wearing. This is why we could stop this stuff from happening.
So the threats to sovereignty
Very
come
well,
from
mind
other
you.
sovereigns, not from individuals. I'm sorry, what was your question?
yeah, so there's no upper limit. So theoretically, like the Chinese could send in 400 million Chinese. They could become citizens.
Send
lot of 'em.
in? Are they invading
I'm
an
saying
army?
send like
No, I don't
send
think
them over.
that makes-
Is there an upper limit? Because you're talking about open borders. I'm asking you what.
No,
I'm just
so-
giving you an absurd example so I could get where your limit is.
No, so I mean, I pretty much agree with, so the model this country had. If you didn't know, this country was an open border country for the first 100 years of its existence. The very first immigration law this country passed was the Chinese Exclusion Act. That's where we went. Now, the Republic didn't fall apart because we had open borders. We had great diasporas of Irish and German immigrants. They weren't very well liked, they weren't very well accepted, but today they are fundamentally part of the American identity, and so are their cultures.
But at that time, right, and I think that's around 1870, there was no welfare system at all. So when you're coming here, you're going to make it on your own. Like it wasn't the skin off anyone's backs. Does that change things?
There's no state of California deciding that maybe we should do curriculums in Spanish so you don't even have to learn English and get a high school education. Like, it was very much, you kind of came here on your own and you came for the adventure. And you succeeded and failed and you needed to assimilate to succeed on your own merits. Like, now it's a cost every time we bring somebody in, especially if they're not paying what it takes to put up to, cover the education costs of their children.
Sure.
And that's not even to get into healthcare.
No, you're presenting a real problem that is worth agreeing with. I agree that you need to find a way to cover the costs of these people when they do immigrate here. You need to find a way to get them into the system, integrate them, which is why I don't think the solution is to just mass deport or close the borders. We've already got these people here. And by the way, 75% of Americans don't think this is a solution either because they overwhelmingly favor legalizing immigrants who are here.
Well, okay, go on, keep going.
So, I mean, the answer to what your problem is a change in the tax code and legalization policy. Get these people here, get them paying taxes, let them assimilate.
Does anyone here want mass deportation though?
Oh, I'll get into this. So one thing that I did notice, to be fair, I only got a little bit personal with you because you decided to attack one of the best shows on YouTube.
But I love
I'm just
you
kidding. No,
all.
literally. That's not saying much, right? YouTube has just become so much trash. But
Excuse me, Elijah. My channel's doing okay. You're so
anyway.
nasty.
Okay, she
Ooh.
looks better in a skirt, but okay. But here's the thing. I see people talking about immigration a lot, and so do you, in economic terms, as if it's transactional. I happen to not look at my country as a transactional country. We have a culture. We are a nation with a distinct identity. And I think we've lost that a lot as a country of just saying, well, but immigration just increased money. So if you told me that, I'm married, and then you go, well, if you bring a prostitute into your home, and then she just whores herself out in your guest bedroom, you can generate more revenue. And I go, that's true. That's true, but I have to put in the cost of changing the sheets regularly, the detergent, and possibly disinfectants. But on top of that, I don't
And don't
want a
forget all
whore
the
in my
condoms,
house.
Elijah. Lots of condoms.
Yeah, it was. Exactly. I'll go to the local state college and pick them out of the bathrooms. But I save money, man. Don't blame me for that. I'm resourceful. But you look at that and you go, well, that's a purely transactional argument. It's like, well, you are going to make more money, but distinctly, that's not how I want my household to be run. That's not how I want things to be. And quite frankly, when I live in a city, I don't want people to speak all different languages. And I don't know why as a country we've made this a racist argument when we're not talking about race or a specific language. We don't have an official language in America. And one of the things that unites us and is really helpful is the fact that we do all speak English. Look at even some of the problems in Canada with the French and the English. Even to look at a tweet. Look at a leader try to tweet. Multiple tweets, things get less and more retweets. You can see the reach that certain people based on language are going to see something in a policy less just on that one platform alone. But I'm bringing this up. This is not a white nationalist, white supremacist view, like not you said, but people try to make it. We need to preserve American value and tradition. And I'm telling you this distinctly of what makes us great. We have certain values and assets, and even religion. And when you go, well, we're just a universalist country that has every religion and it's all equal. So show me where that's worked. Show me what godless communist country where we've all been equal and we've all worked under the same umbrella, under the same bourgeoisie, has actually been successful at driving people forward. Show me how American life has gotten better. Show me even things as we focus on weird issues. Tell me how black people, for instance, how has their life gotten better? Has their unemployment gone down? Has their marriages stayed together more as we fought more racism? No, we are backwards in our society, and we are fighting to have, not only, this is interesting with you too, if you want to have a liberal society, you have to have extreme vetting of people. I always say this, it's not a conservative issue. It's actually an extreme neoliberal issue. If you want to conserve liberal ideas, you've got to make sure that you have tolerant people coming in who understand, can adapt, and learn what's going on. If those people are not about that, or they're not for that, even in their own homes, it actually does affect the country. It affects policy. And so it's like America can't be looked at as transactional. We aren't. I'm just saying, we aren't. And so even if you make the arguments about economic output, it's like, why avoid the cultural talk? And some immigration is good in regards, you can always have some, my wife's an immigrant, paid over $10,000 to immigrate her here. Absolutely fantastic. I'm not against immigration. I just think the kind of stupidity to conflate all immigration under one umbrella and then have no caps is bullshit.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot there to deconstruct, so I'm going to hit on the two main points and save everyone the time. The first thing was Elijah was wondering why this is a argument or a debate that is conflated with race, and there's a reason for that. In the early 20th century, there was a massacre carried out by the Border Patrol in Porvenir, Texas. It's called the Porvenir Massacre. And it was committed against Mexicans who were living there on the border town of Porvenir. And the basis for this was nominally an immigration enforcement issue. You had people who were coming over, committing raids from the Mexican side of the border, and immigration at the time was handled instead by the Texas Rangers on that basis. 20, 30 years later, the Great Depression hit, and we didn't need as many laborers here as we thought we did. So we started this mass repatriation program of Mexicans who were living here. And we wound up sweeping up a lot of American citizens of Mexican ancestry in this as well. Some sociologists have described this as ethnic cleansing. That might be a hyperbolic way to do it, but I mean, this is what happened. You've got a lot of Mexicans who were wrongfully deported from the country. And then 20 years later, you had another program, a famous one, called Operation Wetback. Sydney touched on, the illegal as a pejorative dichotomy. This is where the term wetback was derived from. By the way, every argument you can make for how illegal is a normalized word and not a pejorative has been made for the label wetback. You wouldn't call somebody a wetback today, but Operation Wetback was an immigration enforcement plan done in the 1950s, which mass deported Mexicans, and once again, American citizens of Mexican defense, supposedly to comply with the Bracero program agreement between the United States and Mexico. So why is this racial? Because you have presidents like Donald Trump who, when they're on the campaign trail talking about immigration plans they support, they talk about Operation Wetback. And they talk about it in a positive light, in a way that is distinctly viewed for its racial bias, that it is viewed for the racial animosity which oozes from it. Such animosity which has birthed a pejorative that exists today, wetback. So
Donald Trump said during his campaign Operation Wetback, and
No,
he wanted to bring
he
it
didn't.
back.
He
supported Eisenhower's whatever thing that he heard about just before going on stage.
That's not a bad invitation.
Actually pretty good. I'm
Trump
kind of
did
impressed.
speak highly of Operation Wetback. He didn't call it Operation
Okay, but
Wetback.
none of us are like experts on Operation Wetback, and I mean, you're bringing it up. I think, and this is again, it's like you're diverting away by bringing
I'm
up these,
directly addressing Eli. He wanted to know why this conversation is racial.
But, like,
this
But-
is why.
like,
your
Hispanics are
your
white,
argument
my
relies
guy.
on ignoring linear time. Like, we're not arguing against we're not arguing for immigration enforcement because we were like, Operation Wetback, how about that? Let's redo
I'm not
that
saying
one.
you
Let's
are.
just massacre some Hispanics.
And,
To
and
your-
also,
Love
like,
that.
to
your credit.
to say that you're in favor of open borders because you heard that some Mexican people of Mexican descent who are actually American citizens were wrongly deported is disingenuous because you would support people that are not necessarily from Mexico that have no connection. If we could prove all those American citizens who were wrongly sent away, if we could find who those people were and bring their descendants back in, you wouldn't stop immigration there.
Okay,
So like you're like, here was this racist
I
policy
wouldn't.
in 1950. Linear time is confusing to me. So 2020, Donald Trump is racist.
So once again, I feel like we have a problem with short-term memory loss here. I was addressing Eli's question about why this conversation is racial. And I gave you a very real example of a president who's invoked something that was seen as racially discriminatory. And it's widely seen as racially
Did I
discriminatory.
ask that question,
Yes.
like specifically?
Yes.
Because that's
You specifically invoked race. Yes, I remember it vividly.
okay.
So, do you support open borders, though? I mean, it's
I do.
implied that.
But I
Well,
mean, I like different cultures and diversity and good capitalist
But I mean,
economics.
what limits would you put on immigration then?
I think a reasonable limitation she could put on immigration is threats to national security or threats to people's livelihood or physical safety. I think these are reasonable threats reasonable limitations you can
So
make.
somebody that's been watched that might be on a terror watch list, something like that.
You know this guy's coming in and he's got a history of violent criminality. I think it's pretty reasonable to say maybe you don't want him in, right? But you would measure this on an individual basis. You apply a culture test or you apply a race test. I don't know, man. It seems pretty discriminatory to me.
Well, no, I'm not suggesting a race test, but do you support the existence of a Kurdish state? I'm just curious.
I do.
So you support the existence of a state based on the ethnic group that are Kurds.
Yes.
So how come you don't support? How come you are angry or against? I assume people in Germany that want to keep the state that was founded to be a Germanic state German.
Okay, so I support the Kurds having a state because they're the largest minority group in the world without their own state. I don't have an issue with the Germans wanting to maintain a German state, whatever that means. I'm giving you my
A
preferred...
state for Germanic peoples.
A state for Germanic peoples. What I imagine is this would be a state where there's a lot of human rights abuses that would negatively affect the people there.
What has that got to do with the price of apples?
The price of apples?
What has that got to do with anything? But like human rights, like so.
I was answering Sean's question.
Why would it be a human rights abuse?
Exactly.
It's
What has that
areas.
got to do with
Sure.
sovereignty?
Because when we try to create an ethno-state, what you see is mass deportations in action, or you see things like Nazi Germany.
Do you associate white people with ethnostates?
No, I don't associate white people
Why-
with
So why would
ethno-states.
you associate Germans with an ethnostate just because they had Nazis at one
Because
point
Sean's
in the
question
past?
was, what if Germany tried to create an ethno-state?
No, I mean,
No, he
no.
said, what if
Germany is a
German
state for
country.
Germanic peoples. Like, it was founded as a state in the 1800s because the Germans never had a state. I asked you if you supported a Kurdish state, which is an ethno-state. They're the largest minority without a state.
I support the Kurds having a state. Would I support the Kurds deporting everybody from their Kurdish state who wasn't Kurdish? No.
Keeping it majority Kurdish.
I don't know why that would really matter. I think like
But-
nations are
But
founded on...
you know why it would matter? Because the Kurds are the largest minority population without their own state.
Sure.
Like having a majority Kurdish state
They,
would be
they are
healthy
void of
for
a
the
home,
Kurds.
meaning they are subject to the laws and discriminations of the state of Turkey, Iraq, or Syria.
Exactly.
That's why it's important for them. I can't say the same
That's
for...
why the Germanic state existed, because they were subject.
I don't have a...
That's
again,
why it
I don't
came
have a
into
problem
being.
with the state of Germany existing.
Do you have a problem with it maintaining a majority German population?
I don't know. Do I have a problem with it? So I guess it depends on how you do it. If the way you're going to maintain a majority German population is by closing your borders and deporting people and committing massive human rights abuses, obviously I would have a problem with that.
Why are you putting human rights abuses in that? Like, how would you maintain a German state? This is just a logic question. What would you do to maintain it if you were the president or the prime
I
minister
wouldn't,
of Germany?
because I
But
wouldn't
how would
subscribe
you? I
to
mean, if
this
you had
idea.
to, because you would think it's okay for them to do that, how would they maintain it?
How would they?
Yeah, how would you maintain anything if you want to keep something a certain way? So, like, let's just say I have a glass of Diet Coke up here, and I want to just keep my glass full of just Diet Coke. How could I do that?
I feel like we're a little lost in the weeds in this argument.
No,
how would I?
that is so simple.
I understand that. I don't think you can maintain, say, for example, people who want to turn the United States into an all-white state. I don't think this is something you can maintain without violence or the threat of violence to force people out. And it's the same with Germany. They do have a lot of diversity in Germany.
Well,
You're okay with that,
think
though?
Of course not.
I'm saying you said you're okay with Germans having a Germanic state, but you're saying that would include human rights abuses. Therefore, you're
clearly
okay
I
with
have to
Germans
parse this for you,
giving human
Eli.
rights
What I mean
abuses?
is I'm okay with the state of Germany existing. I'm not okay with the state of Germany existing at the end of a gun with human rights abuses.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because like the Kurds need a state. Minority populations typically they either found a state or they end up oppressed populations. It's the history of the world.
Israel's another good example.
Yeah, it's why Israel exists. But the United States is different. I agree with you. We're not based on a single ethnicity. Like part of the strength of Europe historically is that all the European nations were all fighting each other all the time. Like I'm Hispanic, so my Hispanic side of the family, dates back to Spain, and my Irish side of the family dates back to Ireland. Ireland and Spain, they are not the same places. Like it's not the same peoples. I
But
agree
you
with
found
you.
a place that you
I
could
agree
call
with you
home
on that
for
in
it.
terms of America. I brought up Germany because you brought up Germany. And you said that you endorse Merkel's policies. And they don't necessarily have to deport people out of their country to maintain a German majority. They're a German majority now. If they didn't import any people further to maintain their German majority, would you be against that?
So, again, I feel like you've misconstrued me. When I say I
I'm just
endorse
asking a
Merkel's
question.
policies, well, let me clear this up. I endorse Merkel's policies insofar as her policies follow international law and accepting refugees. You know this full well that the majority of refugees that comes from all of these states end up in the Middle East. They end up in Middle Eastern countries neighboring this. Now, maybe you can argue there's a cultural cohesion to it, and that makes it okay that they're all settled there, except that's not really the case. The culture of the Alawite in Syria isn't the same as the culture of the Alawite or the Sunni or the Armenian or the Turk. There are lots of differences and diversities in even these regions, and to just paint one of them with a broad brush seems a problem. With the Kurds, the issue is a lot more sensitive because the parallels for the state of Israel exist perfectly with the Kurds. And in much the same way I defend the right of the state of Israel to exist, I don't defend Israeli human rights abuses to protect their own sovereignty. And I certainly wouldn't for the Kurds, nor would I do. This is like part and parcel
What
of
do
the
they
conversation.
owe to their own citizens? Like, for example, Germany, right? And you have a bit of unrestricted kind of mass migration coming in. You've long lines of people. coming in and into the borders. And then they were resettled in a lot of different towns. So you would see these incidences in small German towns that were maybe, say, 5,000 people and had 200 immigrants, but then their own citizens would say, my 6-year-old daughter was wearing a skirt and got called a slut. What do these states owe to their own people regarding this? You might have obligations to refugees, but what do you have obligations to your own citizenry?
Well, I mean, a lot of the immigrants into Europe are economic migrants, wrongly labeled refugees. They're not really fleeing conflict zones. They're coming for better economic gains. I don't disparage them for doing that, but, if you want better economic gains, you should probably try to make changes within your own society, because it's ridiculous to have everybody come to Western countries. I understand Western countries are amazing, the best, top tier, first class all the way. But you have to emulate some of those policies in your homeland, and you will repeat those results. That's what we see with Hong Kong. They are the result of the importation of English common law into a rock that has no resources. All of the economic value of Hong Kong comes from their human capital, which is based on a system rooted in English common law. But to go back to what you owe a population, or what the country owes their own population, and that's an immigration policy that best suits the need of those people that are already citizens. You shouldn't cut the knees off of some of your citizens in order to benefit foreign economic migrants.
I actually agree with you 100%. Yes, a nation owes it to its people to have a smart immigration policy that benefits its own citizens. It just so happens that I think that most immigrants do that. Most immigrants tend to assimilate. Hispanic immigrants rate most highly family values as the things that are most important to them. Islamic immigrants, as I've said before, no knock on you, but tend to be more progressive than most American conservatives. Insofar as how these people fit into these societies and how they benefit it, they do. You guys, I assume, have bought a fruit at some point in your life from a supermarket, probably picked by a migrant worker, which itself has its price cheapened by their labor. Americans don't work these jobs. It helps Americans to have these people. Now, are some people hurt by displacement? It's a very real possibility. Yeah, that can happen, just like you can also lose librarians to the internet. You can lose seamstresses to the sewing machine. There's a lot of creative destruction that goes on, and these aren't good. And,
we
smart
can
policy,
control our immigration policy to a certain extent. Obviously,
we can.
Giant country, giant border, but we can control and choose immigrants, because there's a lot of people that want to come here. We don't control the next innovation. It's not comparable to the internet and the library.
Well, it is. There's human capital involved in immigration. I'm sorry.
So when we talk about this, it seems like immigration isn't always racial, right? If you can have white immigration, you can have all kinds of different racial immigration. But it seems, isn't the university language, for example, in the University of Michigan, to say America is a melting pot is a microaggression? Is that your concern, Sydney, that is multiculturalism? That's not assimilation.
So, I don't know if you would classify me as an immigrant. I don't know what we would call me. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Dual citizen.
But what really shits me off is when we do, when we talk about this issue, people always come back to the multiculturalism thing where they're like, oh, it's so great to have all these different foods and things and yada, yada, yada. What you want is a multi-ethnic society. If for people who are super pro-immigration want a multi-ethnic society under the umbrella of, in the Australian case, Australia. If you're going to Australia, you're an Australian regardless of where you come from. Same with America. So if you move here and you intend to stay in this country, I don't care how much food you bring, you have to be an American citizen. You don't get to walk around waving the flag of another country and being like, oh, any day
Like
of
the
the week.
Confederate flag.
Sorry?
Like the Confederate flag.
Dude, that's not another country. That's just something that happened in the history of this country, and it's ingrained in the southern culture.
What's it mean to be an American citizen, though, in your opinion?
Yeah.
I would have to think about that. I don't
If I'm
know.
immigrating here from Mexico,
Document.
Sydney,
I
what
think
would I need to
America's-
do to be American in your eyes?
Sorry?
If I'm immigrating here I'm from Mexico. Let's say I'm from Mexico and I've gotten citizenship. What would I need to do to assimilate to American culture? What is this culture you speak of?
Well, if you've gotten citizenship, you've already done a couple of the steps. You
Is
have
that
to
all it is
English?
to you?
You have to learn English in order to
Vote?
pass the citizenship test.
Be a Democrat?
Yeah, and can I just say this, though? Before we argue anything else, I know we have to wrap this up in a second, but I will say that the mass migration, I should say, one of the biggest crimes against Western Europe from these destabilized countries, like Syria, have really turned a lot of these cities into shitholes. And it's true from personal travel, from friends who live in these countries, from family. It really is a problem. And it is a human rights issue and a crisis for the populations. The European Union committed a human rights abuse against the populations of the European Union by allowing the mass migration of these Middle Eastern people who share no common language or values in there. And they should be charged and disbanded probably too. You can see how much I love globalists. But that being said, that's why when you look at immigration and you look at all these things, and you say, I would say somewhat disingenuously that you want this open borders type of people can free flow and go where they want. It's just not reality, because people value different things. People are not the same. There's a reason why states and countries exist, because people need to form a more perfect union where we can hold these things to be true and self-evident. And so, we have a value system: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And if you love those things, then like you said, as an American citizen, if you are an American citizen, go through the route, hold those values, the Bill of Rights, Constitution, and you respect that, then I'll be damned if you get criticized just because of the color of your skin or because you have somewhat of a funny accent that goes out of the norm. All that being said and done is, we can argue this all we want, but if we had America the way that you would envision it, we wouldn't have a country at all.
Yeah. So I think, I'll let you answer here, but if you guys want to immigrate into the conversation on stage and ask a question, go ahead. Yeah, that was good, huh?
Look
All
forward
right.
to talking to you guys.
International social distancing is what we're calling
Watch
immigration.
out. Go ahead and a quick rebuttal, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the values this country was founded on, right? That all men are created equal, and these values are predicated on life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. This should be equally available as an equal opportunity to everybody. And I think if you're going to apply a bias test in a country we are a melting pot with a lot of different cultures. If you're going to say some cultures are just fundamentally incompatible, you're not really holding up that equality principle, nor are you
This is the multi-ethnic thing. It's not multicultural.
I
It doesn't
literally
work.
said culture.
It doesn't work.
I literally said culture.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't work. Multi-ethnic works. If you want everyone under the umbrella of American, Australian, wherever the hell you're from, fine. Multicultural does not
Can you
work.
just, Sydney,
It
you never
fails.
answered this, but what is the culture of America?
Well,
Do you not see a problem with that? You can't define it. You just know you want one culture, but you don't even know what it is.
okay.
Multi-ethnic is having sushi places and pizza places. Multicultural is having sushi on your pizza. It clashes. And it's disgusting, and you're wrong for liking it. Please leave if you do.
All right. Go ahead with the question.
All right. Hi, folks. Great conversation. I'm going to. My name is Mike. I am from the Angelino stand of the People's Republic of California. So I actually live in Los Angeles. Now, sympathy for the devil. The problems in Los Angeles, I mean, they're all government problems. The highways were built by the government. The schools, it's a unified school district. It is the government that is the problem. It doesn't matter necessarily. All of those people would still be there even if we had completely closed borders. So the problems don't stem from that, in my opinion. The nation is not a house. That's a bad analogy. I want to disabuse that. And I also want to say, as far as somebody coming here from a shithole, I mean, if they're born into a shithole, they didn't create the shit around them. Why should we disabuse somebody the opportunity to improve their lives by stepping across the border? They improve their lives exponentially. So I want to,
Truth.
I want to get back to, I'd like to reiterate the question, because it was pointedly asked what his optional, paradigm would be, and that would be open borders, and that's taking the idea that instead of a nation state restricting things, the border restricts the nation state from imposing itself on another nation. Okay, so that's a different perspective of taking a look at it. But what is your optimal perspective? What is it that would be American culture that would be the test that you would take in order to walk into this country? And I will step back and let you answer.
Clap once for that question. You guys are lame. Come on.
I think he was pointing at you, Sean.
Look, I don't begrudge anybody who wants to come to the United States for a better life or immigrate to any country for a better life. I think that's part of what made America a fantastic country. However, we have a welfare state now, and there's actual cost to that. Like before you came to America, you bought into the system by coming in here. You had to assimilate in order to function, and you succeeded or failed on your own accord.
Get rid of the welfare state.
Yeah. If
Get rid of it.
I mean, I would love to do that, but try repealing any government program. And yes,
It doesn't happen. People are xenophobic. They don't want to pay for other people's stuff.
and yes, it is ridiculous to blame all of California's problems on their illegal immigration population. That is a form of scapegoating, and I don't agree with that. California has terrible governance, and part of that terrible governance is creating magnets for illegal immigrants to come to their state. Like, there's a ton of benefits that you would get for coming to California if you're an illegal immigrant. You don't even have to learn English anymore.
Can I pick that apart?
Yeah, real quick,
I mean,
and
you
then we'll
see
get
the
next one.
unrealistic nature of just completely deconstructing the welfare state. And he's right. This is an argument against the welfare state. It's not an argument against immigration. But the same argument applies that you're not going to get rid of immigration either. You can't get rid of immigration. I don't think that's an argument you go with, but he's asking what your ideal policy is. And your policy seems to be restrict immigration to protect the welfare state. But restrictions on immigration are like gun-free zones. They're about as effective at doing nothing.
Illegal immigration.
Well, we also don't have to make them citizens, or like we can choose who, any nation state can choose who becomes a citizen.
Sure, I'm
like
not
that's
arguing
what a
against
nation
citizenship
state
tests.
is. So if you haven't been chosen to come here, and you do your trial run with the green card for citizenship, then you probably shouldn't be here.
All right, go ahead, Carlin.
All right, so I actually don't mind all illegal immigrants. In fact, I liked one of them so much that I married an illegal immigrant. And then I had to start the 4-year process of going to immigration court every couple of months just to check in to say, yup, still here, still illegal until you give us the green card. And the reason it took 4 years to get him a green card after we got married is because the immigration courts are so backed up with illegal immigrants who are committing crime after crime after crime and lawyering up and going to the immigration court for years and years and years and years and years until they get a trial. So here's my question. How many crimes do they have to commit before we deport their asses?
Who is this directed to me?
Yeah.
I don't know, clue. One. What crime do you want them to deported for? Generally, the your issue.
One crime.
Your issue.
That's it.
Well, your issue is that there's a backlog in immigration courts. I could solve this problem really easily. Just legalize immigration and let the regular courts handle them.
Solve it.
Yes, that's what I said. Let's let all these criminals do crimes.
Hey, guys, I got a trick to reduce the homicide rate down to 0. Just legalize murder. We're good, right?
Legalize immigration. You don't have any immigration crime. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one.
All right, well, here I am again.
My dude.
My dude. So, Mike, one of my greatest criticisms of you has always been there's been no delineation between 3 separate classes of people. Immigrants, refugees, and illegal immigrants I find to be 3 separate classes of people. Now, refugees can occupy two different classes, both legal and illegal, and I believe that certain consideration should be given towards refugees, people who are fleeing from war-torn nations, nations that are controlled by drug cartels, things like that. But this is a criticism, not much of a question. I also have another observation that I've also made. I watched probably one of the greatest of American discourses, something that's been scrawled on a statue that's sitting in the middle of New York's harbor for well over 150 years or whatever. Elijah, keep your ancient lands, your storied pomp. And Mike, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. Right? I'm wondering, we're having a problem with delineating between ethnocentrism and ethnonationalism. There's completely 2 different matters here. It's kind of like how you were describing of a Germanic people. Yeah. Right. So I'm just wondering if you could discuss or kind of define the lines between what you would consider the difference between ethnocentrism and ethnonationalism. That's a question for the panel, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay.
My idea of ethnocentrism is a little bit more of a, how do I put this, a passive system that is birthed from what would arguably be subconscious biases, whereas ethnonationalism, I think, is a political ideology that some would subscribe to, that the nation state should be made up of my ethnic background, or people of my ethnic background. And more than that, that these my ethnic background should have superiority over the people in it. That tends to be what my understanding of ethno-nationalism is.
You want to get on this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to explain to you the fact that anytime you talk as a white person about any type of ethnocentrism, you tread very, very difficult waters because, the only people group that's currently not allowed to have pride or any type of culture or language or anything is actually white people, and in America specifically. It's really an odd thing that every other culture is celebrated. I mean, if you Google pride, black pride, it's in a positive note. If you look up brown pride, it's a positive note. But then you look up white pride, and it's considered to be a racist, derogatory, pejorative, and it's something that is condemned universally. And I'm against racial superiority in general. I don't think that having a country or even having a culture which exclusively looks at itself as better than other people simply because of the color of the skin. Because I don't know about you, but some of the people I hate the most in this country are white liberals. I'll just say that, realistically. And not traditional liberals or people who continually hold up liberal ideas, but just whatever the batshit crazy people are that are ruining this nation. I will say this, then I'll just end with that, is I don't think ethno-nationalism in America is to be inherently just white. And there are people who will disagree with me on that. I think that you cannot deny the fact that a lot of the United States is Caucasian, and the United States and a lot of its culture was built on Western and European values, and those are ingrained in our society. But to also make the point, things happened like slavery, where we have a population of black people who did not come here by choice and who are integrated into the population. So by nature, we are not universally just a white country. So I don't think that it's fair to even take those arguments and try to make them specifically, but I also think that taking this argument that white and European culture isn't dominant in our country and that a lot of what makes up traditional Americanism isn't tied to that is actually intellectually dishonest and is kind of what I think they're trying to do by reimagining this country as a Marxist nation. I think you're a Marxist yourself, correct?
Nope.
No, you're not?
I'm an anarcho-capitalist.
Oh, anarcho-capitalist, that's what you are. All right, there we go.
So can I pick this apart real quick? So I'm glad you bring this up, Elijah. I kind of want to educate you on this. The first part is it's because I love you, my dude. I love you. Okay.
Take off the mask.
No, I love America more than I love you.
Apparently not if you're for open borders.
That's some bedroom words.
Your
right there.
nose is showing, my guy.
Well, thank you for correcting that. So he's talking about these European Western values that denote the nation, right? That occupy our cultural zeitgeist about what these are. These European values produced fascism in the same way they produced Marxism. I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm just saying these are polar opposites. What is a European Western value? Varies. It's very different. It's very different from where you go. It's different from place to place. And I'm sure the American brand of nationalism itself is different from a European brand of nationalism. Now, Elijah seems to have a concern with the inability of whites to take pride in being white, but doesn't seem to understand why this same issue doesn't exist for black pride, for example. Now, just throwing this out there, I tend to find black separatists a little bit not the road I'd go down. But the reason it's different is because they have a different motivation and a different history that births it, right? There's never really been a penalty in this country for expressing white pride in the same way there has been for black pride. That white identities and black identities evolve differently in this country. And
bro,
black
you will
people
lose if you come out white pride or anything, you can lose your entire job, your family, your
today,
reputation.
yes.
So why are we talking about the past? What about today? We're in the moment.
You're asking why these are different. I'm telling you why these are treated differently. You have to talk about the past if you want to know why they're treated differently.
I didn't want to know why. I do know why. I was just making a statement that I believe that we are ignoring certain important factors in the foundation. It was a question specifically about ethnocentrism and nationalism, and I was just saying I do not believe, my answer was to the question, I don't believe that America is only for white people or that it has to be built just on white people,
fair enough.
But the values are important.
Let's go ahead, Dan.
Name's Dan. I am Aniuniwa, of the total of all real people. My ancestors had to walk here from Asia about 15,000 years ago, and we're not real happy about the concept of open borders. It didn't do us very good. And you pointed out ethnic cleansing as immigration policy. Historically, ethnic cleansing has really been resulted quite a few times because of open borders. This is our land. I want to keep it our land. I'm not against inviting guests in. I refuse to use the term illegal immigrant. I use the term legal immigrants and aliens who've entered illegally. I see a difference in that. And I did not see that difference when you were talking about criminality. Illegal entry is a crime. And I have noticed in my own reading that illegal aliens in this country are overrepresented in our federal criminal institutions. Do you differentiate invited legal immigrants from people who entered the country illegally when you come up with your crime statistics?
Yes, there is a difference in these statistics, but both statistics for every demographic group, fun fact, is below that of a Native American, or I should say American citizen, of the same demographic group. I will remark that the reason that illegal immigrants are overrepresented in federal crime statistics is because immigration law is the purview of the federal government. So when an illegal immigrant commits a crime, that would be where most of the immigration law, he's waving me down, he disagrees. Sure.
All right, let's go with the next one.
All right. Hi, my name is Ulysses, and I'm just going to go straight to my question. Can you just go up a little closer? Oh, sure, that's not a problem.
Yell into it.
Okay. So my question is, where do you, for like the European migration crisis that's going on right now, where do you see that crisis going in the next like 10 to 30 years? Will it like turn around, or will it just go to like hell?
I think it depends which countries we're talking about, but I'm presuming that you mean like Sweden and Germany and having lived in the UK for like a year, I don't see that turning around anytime soon. And I think part of the problem is that because anytime people in Europe in these European countries try to have a conversation about it, like many of us in the United States and Australia and many other Western countries, you get shouted down as a racist because this always, for some reason, comes back to like a white supremacy, white nationalist argument, when again, a lot of it comes down to the value systems of the groups of people that you're bringing in. Again, a lot of them are coming over illegally. I believe you made the point that a lot of them are economic migrants, so it's not even like, I mean, these are people who, as a general rule, I would argue, are not necessarily adding to the overall benefit of the countries that they're coming to. If anything, like Sweden, for example, you have a rape rate that has skyrocketed over the last decade because of the migrants who are committing an exorbitant amount of rapes against the white population. And in the way that these politicians are trying to deal with it is not to say, let's get rid of these people and let's make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. If anything, they're trying to pacify them. And there's something really sick and really wrong with a mentality that says, let's pacify, rather than let's eliminate the issue entirely. And that's what Europe is doing. It's trying to pacify presently the issue rather than actually eliminate it. Because they don't care about their existing citizens. And I think there was this question that you asked before is, you know, they owe everything to their citizens because those are the people who pay the taxes, they're the people who vote in the politicians, they're the people who live, eat, breathe in these countries, and they come first. Migrants, immigrants, refugees, you do not come first, especially if you're illegal.
Are you saying doing cartoons that tell people not to rape in Sweden didn't drive down the rape rate?
I'm really shocked that it didn't. My God, every time I see those, I'm like, damn. I'm
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about that too. I was like, I'm so glad they have those cartoons, or we'd all be rapists, because you know all men are naturally rapists, anyways. That's according to the narrative, or Tommy Lahren, I should say. But anyway.
No, she just thinks they're trash.
Yeah, sorry, they're just trash. There you go. But I was going to say. Specifically, when we're talking about the issue in Europe, you know, we can look at Poland and look at some of the Eastern European countries. God knows they are doing something right finally, because they came from communism. They came out of this oppression, and they don't want to lose their countries again. They don't want to lose their identities again. They want to hold Christian values, strong Christian values. And you look at Western Europe. I mean, Western Europe is so effed with the migration crisis that, like, even in Germany, they don't release the race of perpetrators, like on the news, on broadcasted news, especially if they're considered to be Islamic or if they're Middle Eastern, because they don't want to perpetrate systemic racism against them. And there's a lot of weird things. And so when you start backing in a culture and you're hiding crime stats, you're hiding the race of people, you're trying to prevent the national discourse. I mean, if you look kind of like with Cannon Hinnant, the 5-year-old boy who was killed and executed in his front lawn by a black individual, and the media was silent about it, or the riots that just happened in Chicago and the media silence on MSNBC, CNN, it's because, why? It completely violates the race narrative. I mean, if you're talking about that riots are because of George Floyd, but then people are just looting, Michael Jordan's, then it crushes that narrative. If you say that, all the violence is against black people, it crushes the narrative that, that we have some systemic racism. So that being said, with this, just to kind of sum it up, I think that the issue, as long as the countries deny what's really going on, as long as they suppress what the crime statistics, as long as they try to hide what's actually happening in migrant communities, and they don't allow police officers, fire departments, et cetera, to speak out about their fears in going into certain communities, things are naturally going to degrade like any wound. If you ignore it, it can turn into an infection, and you can end up getting amputated.
It's already an infection. It's because they can't call it out because of the racism thing. Like, if you think about it, think about the Rotherham rape gangs, for example. Thousands and thousands and thousands of children were raped by what they call Asian. And this is the thing that drives me crazy about the Brits. And I love the Brits, they're great, but like they call the Middle Easterners in the UK Asian because if they were to call them Arab or whatever, or refer to them as Islamic or call them Muslims and whatever, they would be called out. They would be called racist. They would be absolutely lynched for it. This is a terminology thing where we're not allowed to use specific words to rightly characterize people because it's racist. And this is what is debilitating Western countries: is this inability to call a spade a spade. Australia does it. America does it. We use all these different terms, this is like I was saying before, to control the narrative, to control particular talking points and things, and it's gross, and it's actually letting the populations of these countries down.
If only there was a
We
Bible
got a few more
story
questions,
about
just
it.
want to get them in,
Tower of Babel, right? But here's my question. The importance of citizenship compared to other identities. So is citizenship something that should be valued? Is citizenship something that has with it responsibilities and rights? How does citizenship relate to things like ethnic identities or racial identities? And is dual citizenship a good idea or a bad idea? Just citizenship. Go.
I mean, I have nothing against dual citizenship depending on the country. Like, that's just me personally. I know a lot of people think that's the dual loyalty issue and all that. So I have nothing against that. Citizenship to me in the U.S. is valuable because you're buying, you're natural born, so people are born here, so whatever. But when you become a citizen, you're buying into the U.S. system. Like, you have to learn English to take the citizenship exam. So citizenship does have value, and you should be prioritized as an American citizen. In Europe, I mean, it depends on what their immigration system is. I'm not really that attuned to what the European different immigration systems are, so I wouldn't really know. But again, Europe's a little different because the states in Europe are set up, they're literally ethno-states, like Germany's for the Germans, Italy's for the Italians. Most countries in the world are ethno-states. Japan's for the Japanese. Australia's for English criminals, right? Something like that.
Sure, settlers?
Yeah. But,
strangers?
Yeah. But so it depends on the country, but I think in the United States, it means that you've either inherited or you've bought into the ideal because the United States is not an ethno-state. We're a nation based on a creed, on principles. So I think citizenship should be valued here.
I pretty much 100% agree with what Sean just said. Citizenship as an idea is really cool, and it's a little bit more than just having legal rights conferred upon you. The question at heart of this debate is, should nations be nations of blood and soil, or should they be nations of ideas? And I'm a big proponent of having a nation of ideas, which is why I don't want to segregate some cultures out to say you can't come in here, or some ideas out saying you're fundamentally incompatible. Whatever this American idea is, if it's based on the principles of liberty, you have to allow even for bad ideas in much the same way we allow for Republicans. That's a harmless jab. That said, the heart of his question was about identity. What does this identity mean? I think a lot of these identities can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but it is an important identity nonetheless. My problem is that we get so caught up in defending and honoring this identity by excluding others from partaking in it that we shoot ourselves in the foot. So here's some fun facts about Japan. When conservatives say they love Japan, What I think about is a country with a lot of easy access pornography and socialized healthcare and legalized prostitution and soy-heavy diets. It sounds like a leftist utopia, except they've got really strict immigration policies. So what does that policy get them? Well, it gets them a labor force of some 40 million Japanese citizens who are very secure in their Japanese identity, who can't retire. It gets them an underfunded Social Security. It gets them 1 in 5 people working more than 80 hours of overtime a week. So count from you, go to number 5, you're going to be working 80 more hours every month in Japan than you would if you were anywhere else. And that's all in the name of protecting your identity. Japan has the 7th highest suicide rate in the world. So what do the Japanese get in the name of protecting this identity? They get depressed, stressed, overworked, tired, suicidal. They don't get to retire.
I didn't use Japan as a positive example. I just used it as an
I know you
example
didn't,
of
but
an
a lot of
ethnic
people
state,
like
of
Japan,
an
so I use
ethno
Japan.
state.
I don't know a single conservative, as a conservative with mostly conservative friends, who's ever been like, you know what we should be like? Japan.
Well, also Japan leads
You know,
the world
funny
in
anecdote about
robotics.
that?
They're building new people. That's kind of dope.
I mean, their
They
population.
have a very low birth rate. So
Terminator's going to come out of Japan. So
All right, Justin.
what's up, Justin?
Let's get you in.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, little nervous. Never asked a question at a panel before. And because I've never been to one of these because I'm a social justice warrior. I've been a self-described one forever.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. And I was a little.
Clap once for Justin.
Yeah, so I was a little. Like I said, nervous coming here, and I'm also a little bit confused, and I was hoping you can clear up some of my confusion. So. We're at this Better Discourse event where we're supposed to have all these ideas competing that are completely apart from each other. There just doesn't seem to be a whole lot of reconciliation between them because, the marketplace of ideas and the best idea wins. But what I heard from some conservatives up here is that, we can't survive having the wrong values come into our country. And you were always really vague when you said values. It just sounded kind of like a buzzword, but vaguely Christian, sort of European. But so how do you reconcile your love of free speech in the marketplace of ideas, but also protectionism and safe spaces for the ideas you love the most?
So I actually didn't get a chance to answer the question about what makes America. It's a system rooted in English common law, not something vague like based on liberty or any ethnic group. We're a nation that is rooted in the tradition of English common law. Obviously, we have a revolutionary string to us and all that, but those are the underlying values. It's not a dog whistle. These values work everywhere in the world that they're tried. Hong Kong is a great example. Have you looked at the population of Hong Kong? What's the percentage of white people, a native Hong Konger? Do they look white? Right? Asian, right? They do significantly better than those in mainland China. Mainland China, way more resource rich. They just have the incorrect system. And there's plenty of people across all racial lines that are accepting of English common law values, and they make great citizens of Western countries. India is a great example. You know what the #1 income earner is in the United States, the United Kingdom, and in Canada? Indian Americans. They buy into the system. If you buy into that system, you can come here. And that is a system that is tolerant of good ideas, bad ideas. But that's the underlying system.
You gonna answer Justin's question, though?
Yeah, you got to buy into the system. We don't have a duty to import people that are undermining the base system of the United States of America.
And
Look, at
So-
the end of the day, in my opinion, I know that I think your stab was probably at me a little bit. When I talk about values and I talk about incompatible value systems and ideas and things, I'm talking about things that directly contradict the things that we in this room more than likely all share universally, regardless if we're left or right wing. Although I would argue that some left wing values are completely psychotic and probably should never be enforced anywhere. But that's just me personally. But when I talk about values, again, I'll come back to things like there are cultures out there that legitimately think that women are half the value of a man. There are legitimately cultures out there that have belief systems that want to subjugate specific groups of people. I don't think that's okay. And that's not a culture or an ideology or a value system that I want to import to my country that says that we are all equal, regardless if you believe in God or whatever. These are just things that no matter where you go in the Western world, these are things that we should be upholding. And if we want to enforce these other ideas, it has to be vague when we use these terms because you want me to sit here and label all of them out. No, I mean we have to be vague in some of these terms. But if you want me to get specific, like I said, oppression of women, things like that. These are things that do not work in America, and I would not want them here. So yes, I believe in free speech. I believe you can go out there and go, I hate women, but that doesn't mean that I want that enforced in this country. If there was a politician out here being like, you know what we should do? We should just, all women should be chattel again. That sounds great. You know, guardianship laws? Heck yeah. I'd be like, no, I'm never voting for them.
Elijah, do you have anything, or were you going to go with Stephen?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say that kind of brings up the point where people say, well, then how do you be tolerant and then not tolerate certain people? Well, you can't tolerate intolerance, okay? You cannot bring in people who are not tolerant of the values and the ideas that you have. People who are antithetical, who work against the shared common values in this country. And you go, well, values, that is so vague. No, it's really not vague. I mean, if you talk about an American ideal, there's this desire to raise most people, either to raise a family, or even if you're a single person, to raise an economic status, to buy a home, to share common values, to have a great social life, etc. And many people, it's faith religions, predominantly Christian. While there are some other religions, we believe in the tolerance of other people to have their own religion and to not subjugate them to harsh or unfair treatment because of their beliefs. We believe in some liberal ideals, but we also often institute them in conservative ways where the government has, I would say, historically, minimum intervention into our own personal lives. It is a government by the people, for the people. I mean, but some of these things are intentionally vague, and they were written that way in American bylaw, but also the Constitution is very explicit at the same time, because there are certain things and certain amendments that we need to hold true, which is the right to protect ourselves, freedom of speech, etc. But also, too, I think that when you say, well, what are the vague values? I think that America gives the ability for families and individuals to kind of decide their own life as long as you respect these basic tenets that bring us together.
Okay.
And,
Vague values, don't abuse kids.
running
Pedophilia
out
is
of time
wrong.
a little
Don't
bit.
rape
So
little boys.
you
like,
can-
Yeah, we
can
want
advocate-
to
these are
get Stephen in
values,
here.
not okay.
You can advocate for whatever you want, but as soon as you try to set up your own alternative courts or your alternative legal system and try to enforce your religion in your own isolated community, yes, that is a problem. That is a violation of our system of law.
All right, go ahead, Stephen.
I got two really quick questions. I really want to know how the Confederate States of America, that was a separatist country that broke off from the U.S., is the same country as the United States. That's one. And then the second one is I really want a list of these values that rural people in like Nebraska and Iowa and Arkansas share with people that are like liberals in San Francisco or L.A. Really want to hear those two
Don't
things.
abuse women. Like, don't rape children. Pedophilia is wrong.
Catholics
These are
or,
values
like, what,
that
like-
everyone shares. I don't
When you say
understand
don't
the
oppress
question.
women, like pro-choice and abortion, like Republicans do?
No,
or what,
dude,
like-
those are things that are individualistic to specific people. I'm saying there are universal values like don't hurt women. Women are just as equal as men. These are things that the majority of us. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that women aren't as good as men? No, because this is a universal value. Does anyone here think it's okay to
is there
rape
anyone in the room
kids?
that doesn't think that women should serve in active combat roles in the military?
Dude, that's not the same thing as
Oh,
women not being
now-
equal.
why don't we- why don't we ask
Should
a little
I,
bit
as
more
a
of an
woman,
honest
be able to
question?
get
Come
a
on, let's be a
job?
They have equal value
Yes.
of they have equal value of rights, but they are also distinctly different, and that's important to realize. That I know that while there are some, actually there are, according to the diets and the way men are looking in 2020, I actually trust quite a few women by my side on the battlefield and some of those guys, TikTok e-boys to be some of them. But I will say this, you know, when you're talking about like shared values between different places, I mean this is universally a problem, and I think that this comes down to the point where it's very important we look at states' rights. And it is important for states and communities to have individual freedom because there are differences. But at the same time, because we are a state of the union, there has to be some basic underlying shared principles. But you're absolutely right. People in rural Nebraska and people in Los Angeles almost live in different countries in terms of what they value. People in Los Angeles clearly don't care about mass homelessness, mass incarceration, drug usage. They don't care about cleanliness, etc. By the way the city works and the leaders they elect as the example. But I will say that, I mean, that's just from living there. It's literally the most disgusting place. We had a game where you'd have to walk over poop, and whoever could count the most poop they walked over human feces, you would win a prize. Anyway. Most points to someone who found a dead body, but that's not even out of the picture. I'm just going to end with this and saying is that with these ideas of rights and values, etc., that's why this union was designed this way, because we realized that having one totalitarian, authoritarian, federalist government that gave all the rules, laws, and understandings could not properly govern each individual territory and community, which is why we gave so much power to governors, to the states, to courts, and we have Supreme and Circuit courts, and the separation of the branches, because we realized that one branch can abuse it all. And so, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like rhetorical, but yes, they are different, and that's why they're governed differently. So I'm just saying, like, values vary slightly, but if they're not universally together, then, and I didn't say anything about the Confederate. I'll let someone say that, because I didn't make that statement about the Confederate.
Really quickly, we all know equality under the law does not mean equal in all regards. Like, if you put NBA players against WNBA players, I'll bet you money on who's going to win that every single time. Like, you're talking about a physical
You've got
distinction.
trans people forbidden from serving in the military by Trump's executive actions.
Yeah,
Where's the
because
equality under the
mental
law?
illness.
What fundamental? Okay,
Well,
so there you've got it. Being trans
Are you
isn't a
going to
mental
let someone
illness,
go?
and
you
this
know,
isn't
you know
a
who they
conversation
weren't letting in the
Sydney's certainly
military is
capable
people
of
with
having.
depression who have anxiety. I couldn't serve in the military because there are these things.
You know you can be trans without depression and anxiety?
Yeah, but you can't be trans without some sort of like mental illness.
As long as it's in the DSM-5 as gender identity
Oh, boy.
disorder.
Sorry,
now
guys.
it's gonna
Sorry
be
to anyone
mental
trans
illness.
Yeah,
in the
we've
crowd,
definitely
but I'm
taken
sorry, this
a
is
left
mental
turn.
thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry
we're
about that.
definitely over time.
It's okay.
Sean, what do you want to
Sorry.
say?
So I just have a comment. First of all, if Milo doesn't show up, Elijah, you're going to take his place, so that'll be great. That was fantastic. Secondly, I just want to allude to Brian talking about the planning of this panel. So our planning process is this: whoever yells the loudest and swears the most gets their way. So
Fuck yeah.
Pretty much.
It's
So
epic.
the immigration panel is a very important topic, even though it's not BLM and all the stuff that's going on right now. It's still very important. And one of the things I know Elijah and Jack both saw this in Chaz. What was the first thing they did?
Set up borders.
They set up borders.
Lots of borders and their own police system.
They set up borders in their own police system. So it is a very important topic, and
That's why anarchists are stupid.
And I'm glad we had it. So thank you to everyone. We bought these masks that Michael's wearing right there to remind everyone that we are American.
I'm proud to be American,
Yeah,
man.
we're all American. This conversation wouldn't happen in China. This conversation wouldn't happen in places that don't have free speech. So thank you.
All right, we'll
You
take
guys
that as
are great.
comment. All right, thanks, Justin. We're going to put you back up.